It's Sunday, the 12th of January 2020. In this video, I'm going to talk about a couple of developing gold stocks, our precious metal stocks, actually, three of them. And I just wanted to say that a couple of the stocks being discussed here were requests from subscribers to the Patreon page. This video is a free video that is on YouTube, but I've got some others that are only accessible through the Patreon page. I've already had 60 people sign up. It's $6 a month. So if you're interested, there'll be weekly content similar to what's been on the YouTube channel. But I'm willing to also look into if people have specific requests of stocks they'd like me to have a look at. I'm willing to sort of give my view on those companies as well. So that's what two of the three companies that I'll be discussing today, how they've come about. So if you're interested, go and have a look at the Patreon page and maybe put the $6 down, and there'll be weekly content similar to what's been done previously. So the first stock among those three is Genesis Minerals. Now I'm a shareholder in this company. I've just been buying it in the last couple of weeks, pretty much where it is now. 3.3 cents is my average price. I've been reviewing quite a few of these sort of low, sort of mid micro, not quite micro cap, junior sort of Aussie gold stocks still in Western Australia. There's been a lot of takeovers of these sort of companies in the last year. So if I'm going to venture into these companies where I've been burned before, sort of looking too far down at the developers that are kind of only got a project and no real chance of getting into production, I want to see they've got a bit of a backstop, and that's why I like this company. I think their resource. They've said this presentation's about a month out of date, but they did just do an upgrade of their resource slightly after that presentation. So they've got their measured indicated resource up over almost 600,000 ounces now. So you can see that they're getting toward a reserve, which is more than some of these other companies that are still floating around in Western Australia. A lot of them have got lots of resources, but not necessarily a mineable project. And that's why I like this company. So I can see they're going to have, I would have thought, probably have 500,000 ounces in reserves roughly at pretty good grade as well. So it's an underground project. They've said they're 4.5 grams a ton there for the higher grade portion. Some of those are inferred resources, but in general, it's a fairly well drilled out project. And the thing that I really like about it is the proximity to a number of other mines or existing processing plants. So you can see here, this project is actually right on the Goldfields Highway, literally either side of the highway. I think they've got a photo here. This is the main highway that runs through the Goldfields, and the pits are right next to it. So there's a good possibility, I think, they get bought out. And there's been a few of these. The Saracens just been buying up a couple of juniors around their projects. I think also, who else? Silver Lake bought out Egan Street as well. Ramelius has bought a couple of satellite projects. So there's been this real sort of desire for these small mid-cap Australian gold miners to do these bolt-ons for nearby deposits. And particularly here, Gwalia has a few problems of its own at the moment. They've only got a 1.2 million ton per annum mill, and they're trying to fill that from their existing underground resource. But whether they can actually get to fill it up with enough ore still remains to be seen. We should see that in the next sort of 6 months, whether that's the case. But this is only 30 kilometers from Gwalia, so St Barbara could quite easily truck this ore, and it's a good grade that they could still get a decent amount of extra production from it. The other thing is, you've got something like King of the Hills from Red 5, which is a new project, a big open pit resource that I think they're thinking about like a 4 million ton mill there. So it'll be a huge mill that needs some good satellite feed of underground ore that could bolster the grade there. Would be really desirable for them. I think Red 5's up towards sort of a $400 million market cap now as well. So they are another potential candidate. And Dacian as well, with a 2.5 million ton mill at Mount Morgans. That's predominantly a lot of the ore there is open pit, low grade, sort of 1.2 grams, I think. So they've got underground for the next few years, but and they're doing more and more drilling. But something like this project from Genesis would be a good bolt-on acquisition, I think, for some of these companies. So it's trading at about a $45 million market cap, roughly, at these prices. Still got a little bit of cash in the bank. Should probably have another 6 to 9 months of cash available, and I think that I'd be expecting them to declare a reserve in the next 6 months. I think they're working on the feasibility study. There was a scoping study about a year ago that went into sort of looked at all-in sustaining costs might be in that sort of $1,100 to $1,200 range. The scoping studies are usually sort of on the positive side. Even if that slipped out a bit to say $1,300 or $1,400, I think that would still be a good little bolt-on for some of those larger companies. So I noticed that Alkane has bought 15% of this as well. I like it when a bigger mining company, and not that Alkane's huge, but they've been a relatively successful sort of junior for a number of years. I like it when a company like that sort of gives a bit of a vote of confidence and subscribes to some shares, and it seems like they're in it for the longer term. Alkane were actually in trying to buy a stake in Explorum, but when Ramelius took that over as well. So I've got a feeling Alkane, one of their strategies might be to look for sort of near-term projects that could be taken over as well, but have potential in their own right. I think the scoping study for this project was for a 0.8 million ton mill, but I just don't see that happening. I just think it'll be taken over before that with all these decent mines that kind of need bolt-ons. These decent sized mills, I think there's a good chance that this project gets bought out eventually. And they're doing good drilling. They've been sort of toiling away. It's not a well followed stock, which I kind of like. So that's why I'm kind of interested in this stock. And I've just bought a small stake in the last couple of weeks, as I said. So it's one that I'm one of the few that I sort of thought might have some potential with some near-term catalysts as well. If there's Australian gold price up over 22.50, I think this week, and got as high as 23.50 on the spikes, and I can see that that really sort of igniting more takeover action for some of these smaller companies. So that's one that I'm in at the moment. The other two that people asked about that I'm not a shareholder in. First one, Tietto Minerals. That's in Ivory Coast, and it was a stock that I got a tip about probably 6 to 9 months ago, and at the time I didn't buy it. I thought it was decent, and at the time I think it was trading about 10 cents a share, 10 to 15 cents. Probably in about this move here, I sort of thought about buying it. At the time I didn't have the money available, so I looked at it, and it's very similar to something like Cardinal was, where Cardinal were say 3 years ago. The market cap's pushing about 100 million now. They did a capital raising after this presentation was done, and they raised another $15 million, I think. So it's in Ivory Coast, which has proven to be a pretty good jurisdiction, pro mining. I know Perseus has built Sissingué there, and also in the process of building Yaouré as well. So it's a decent mining jurisdiction, and I'm not overly concerned about that. It's probably on par with something like Ghana now, and probably taking away some of the investment that might have been in Burkina Faso's had a few problems as well with Islamic terrorists. So I like that part of it. The resource is decent. They actually just did an upgrade after that presentation, so they're up to 1.8 million ounces now, but a lot of it's inferred. 2.2 million ounces it is, and but it's only 860,000 ounces in the indicated category, which I really look at these. I think a lot of people just look at total resource and think of that's what's in the headline, that's what's important, but ultimately inferred resources are useless to me. I mean, I want to see, and to comply with the JORC code, they have to be, if they're going to be reserves, they have to be measured or indicated resources. So I think this project's got some potential to get to that, maybe a 1.5 to 2 million ounce reserve, but it's going to take a lot more drilling, and it's probably going to be another year away before they get to that point where they could actually define a reserve of that amount. I think also a lot of it's a sort of confined to this high grade area, and whether they can extend it, to me, I think is pretty I reckon that it might be kind of capped a little bit, the scale of this reserve or this resource that could potentially go into a mining reserve. So that was one thing that sort of deterred me a little bit. And some of these drill hits kind of a little bit reliant on some high grade, and I don't know how that translates in when they do the reserve modeling, resource modeling, if that they can guarantee the continuity of those those grades. I think it shows it in here. It shows there's a slide with, might be a bit further down. Yeah, you can see here that it's, they've got 4 meters at 100 grams, but it's actually just 1 meter of really sort of significant mineralization. Similar here, they're I think these high grade, they've got 36 meters at 4 grams, but a lot of it's confined to that 1 meter interval. So when it goes into a resource model and into the software that they use, I don't know how well that's going to translate, and if they can guarantee and translate those resources into an ore reserve. So that was one thing that sort of deterred me, but it's still a decent project, and I think it's probably got some potential. It's years away from production. I think in here they had a bit of a timeline. The metallurgy looks pretty good. That was one thing that got Cardinal into trouble. So the preliminary metallurgy results, where they got the timeline. Yeah, so they've got a timeline here. I think you're only talking about, you're not looking at any reserves until the end of 2020 at least here. So preliminary mining studies is really a pre-feasibility study. So you're probably toward the end of 2020, you're going to have I'd say a PFS come out, and then probably midway through 2021, they'd be looking at doing a definitive feasibility study. So, and then after that, another 18 months for production. So I think you're looking at potentially sort of end of 2022, early 2023 would be the earliest at which these guys are going to come into production. That's just the reality of going through all these. I mean, a scoping study isn't based on reserves, so that's kind of a little bit meaningless. I mean, it's just sort of it shows the potential of the project, but until you get the reserves, you can't really see what this could be. But it might be a decent scale project, sort of. I'm guessing in that sort of 150,000 ounces per year sort of category. So it's decent, but it's not going to shoot the lights out for me. And given I had a heavy shareholding in Cardinal, that was one of the reasons I didn't buy into this company, because I thought it was very similar, kind of just a mini one, whereas Cardinal's got a 5 million ounce reserve, and they've done a lot of drilling to get to that point. I understand that Tietto is a fair way away, but obviously if I bought it at 10 cents, I'd be pretty happy now because it's trading at 27.5. So it's done very well, but I'm not overly anxious to get in there until I see unless they have some real game changes in the drilling. So that's the other one. The last one, someone asked me about Silver Mines Limited. So I have looked at this company. Now I know a lot of people are really interested in silver. I'm not a silver bull. I treat it as really just a leveraged gold. Like if there's a real gold run, silver's probably also going to run, and probably run harder. But I know that there's a lot of industrial demand for silver as part of what drives the silver price, and the industrial demand has been sort of weak for the last year. So I think industrial demand makes up more than the sort of precious metal demand for silver, for example. So it's not something that I'm eager to get into, but I know a lot of people are. And this Silver Mines Limited is one of the only companies on the ASX that's sort of a pure silver play. There's not many mines in Australia that are real silver plays. I think this was spun out of Kingsgate as well. So this project's been floating around for a long time. Market caps, I think, up about 100 million there. They did a capital raising after this presentation. I don't like New South Wales. I know they've said quality jurisdiction here. There's been more and more problems in New South Wales. I know Regis is having problems at their McPhillamys project. It seems to be a bit of an anti-mining lean that's starting to come in there. It's I think it's rated as the worst jurisdiction in Australia. Still good on a world scale, but I think there's a lot of sort of bureaucracy, and that's delaying projects. And now there's a lot of water issues as well. I don't know if that's a specific thing for Silver Mines Limited. So I'll sort of plead ignorance there, but in general, there's more and more issues in Western Australia, in New South Wales than there have been in other states. So it's not I don't see it as a quality jurisdiction as it perhaps once was. Now, this gold-silver ratio is something that has been getting brought up more and more. Everyone sort of looks at the historical relationship that silver should start outperforming now, and that ratio should start coming down. It probably should happen as well. I agree with that. That sort of historically, we've never really been up around this sort of 90 level. I think this chart's a little bit out of date, but I think it's still around the sort of mid to high 80s. But like I said, industrial demand, I'm sort of pretty bearish on some of those, like the industrial demand sort of story for a lot of the base metals. China sort of continuing weakness. So whether that you're really waiting for the speculative juices from investor demand to overcome any industrial weakness, I think. So we're probably at that point now. If the gold price really takes off, people start moving money into silver as well, and that can overcome some of that industrial weakness. More on this project. One thing, so in here they talked about, I really, in my head, I translate everything kind of into gold. So when I see 275 million ounces, I think it's about a 3 million ounce gold deposit in mineral resource, which is a reasonable size. But one of the problems is the grade is quite low. So, and the upfront capex is quite high as well. So a $250 million Australian capex. This feasibility study was done in 2018. That's a very, very high capex for a company of this size. Aside from that, I actually got the copy of the feasibility study. So the problem with the project is actually not economic at current prices. So it's really reliant on that surge in silver price. So you can see here that so if you look at here, this is the key sort of stuff when looking at a feasibility study. They've assumed silver prices. This was published in 2018. Obviously, it's not going to become a mine in 2020, but they've assumed 2150, 2250. And even with those assumptions, they're only looking at a sort of a 18% internal rate of return, which is quite low. And we're still 15 or 20% below those silver prices, even after the sort of little mini run we've had. So for this project to get off the ground, you're going to have to see silver prices sustained over, I would have thought, over sort of $22 to $25 before anyone would really sort of finance this project. I mean, obviously you can see here there's been that surge in interest. The stock sort of tripled in the space of a couple of months there on the gold bull run in July and August. So, it's still that speculative interest in silver is always there. It's sort of the original Bitcoin. People are always interested in silver. I sort of stick to my knitting and stay in the gold space. But I know that the silver will start running at some point. But so this project's they made this point in here that it's extremely leveraged to a higher silver price. So a 20% increase in silver price results in a 240% increase in the project's net present value. So that's really talking about an increase in the silver price to that sort of range that I was saying, 22 to 25 bucks US an ounce, and then the project may get off the ground. But again, still got high capex. A fairly sort of average jurisdiction, and it's fairly low grade as well. So I think, I'm trying to remember what the resource grade is here. I think we're talking about 100 grams per ton. I'm trying to find it in here. But anyway, it's that sort of concerns me a little bit, that this project is not a brilliant project. It may be one of the largest undeveloped silver deposits in the world. That's kind of irrelevant for me. That all that means is there's a lot of silver in the ground, but it doesn't mean it's economic to get it out. And I think that's kind of the issue I see. So it's still a fair way away from going ahead. If you're really interested in the silver price and think that silver's going to go up sort of 50 to 100%, this would be a good way to play it. But I prefer to stick to the gold space. But I can understand why people are interested. But you've also got to be aware that if they don't get, the longer the project sort of sits there, these companies have to gradually dilute their number of shares on issue as well. So that causes more and more dilution, which you can see here. This the company's been going sort of backwards for the last few years. So how long can that continue? And you're really betting on that silver price move. So I like the projects to be that don't require a real increase in the underlying commodity. Like they can still stack up at fairly low prices and may get off the ground anyway, but really get that kicker if the price keeps going up. So this project won't get off the ground at today's silver prices, but it may if silver goes up sort of 20 to 50%. So that's three stocks that I think are relatively interesting, and I think a few people might be interested in as well. And yeah, if you've got any requests, I'm happy to take some on the Patreon page as well if you sign up and do a little bit of a rundown as well. Thanks a lot.